So I was the drum major of the University of Texas Longhorn Band, the show band of the Southwest, which that means that I was the primary student leader for that 450 person organization. For 2 years, I got to do this, and it was an unbelievable experience. People often ask me like, oh, so you must have been a really amazing musician, to which I immediately respond, no, I was the opposite of that. I actually wasn't all that great of a musician, and I'm still not. But the reason why I got accepted as drum major through a pretty rigorous interview and audition process is because I made the case, standing up against people that were getting their PhD in music performance going for the position. I made the case that this isn't actually a musicianship role. This is a leadership role. And I said, I've read a bunch of leadership books, but musicianship is never found in any of them. And so I said, leadership is all about relationship. And so I made a commitment in the interview process. I said, if you select me for this role, I am going to know the name of every single person in the 450 person organization by October 1st. I made that commitment. And I guess they believed me because they selected me for the role. And then sure enough, by October, I had every single name of every single person memorized. It wasn't until later that I realized the Longhorn Band is 450 people at that time. The campus of the University of Texas is 40,000. So I knew 1/100th of the campus of the University of Texas. So literally I would walk to class anywhere, any time of day. And I mean, it would just be like the guy that's running for president, right? Like kissing babies, shaking hands, all of that, right? But here's what's crazy. When I look back on those 2 years of my life, there was so much that was so good and God used them in such powerful ways. I was connected to so many people. I could talk to so many people about anything, and I knew seemingly everyone, but I was known by no one. And so I was wildly connected, but incredibly isolated in that time. I could have small talk conversations with so many people, but I couldn't have deep, real, intentional conversations with hardly anyone. And if I would look back on that period of my college years, I didn't have the appearance of loneliness. I wouldn't have even probably been able to identify myself as lonely. But now I look back and I say, that guy was really lonely. That guy was really isolated. And so it's why I have such a heart and in some ways empathy for this topic, because I just see so many of the business owners and leaders that we coincide with, they're doing what junior and senior year Alex was doing. They are so connected and they're surrounded by people. And they think that because they're surrounded by people, that means they're not isolated. But in reality, the fruit of their life would attest to the fact that they are deeply isolated and alone. And ultimately, the trajectory that they're on is not going to end well unless something changes. And so that's why I think it's so critical that we dive into this topic here today.
Yeah. Why is isolation so dangerous?
Because it's not what we're created for. Right? Genesis says, like God said, man, it's not good for man to be alone. And he gives Adam Eve. And then later in Acts, it says, do not give up the habit of meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, right? It's like, that's talking more about corporate worship and gathering, but the principle remains that we are not created to live this independent, individualistic, separated life. Rather, we were created as a human being to live in community with other human beings. And when we think we're the one that doesn't apply to because we're in a leadership position or because we own a business or because of the demands on our life or because of the pace we have to move, when we think, oh, that stuff doesn't apply to me, that is the greatest act of pride. To say a fundamental God-given human need doesn't apply to me is just incorrect. But what's good is God never gives us a need that he doesn't always give us the means to fulfill. Mm-hmm. So it's not like he created this massive gaping hole that we all experience that we don't also have the means to fill. And that's what we're going to talk about some in this episode is the ability to fulfill this need and be a deeply, deeply connected, fruitful, flourishing human that lives in community with other people, that is known and that knows other people, is absolutely readily available to everyone right now. Praise God.
There is a study that was done. I heard referenced in a sermon recently, and I think it was the CDC announced back in maybe it was 2018 or 2019 they called it like the epidemic of loneliness.
Mhm.
And it's so interesting that that happened before the pandemic and before everyone got locked in and virtual work became, way more common on the back end of that. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts around like, why is that a more common thing that even had to be labeled in more recent years? And then what are maybe some of the contributors just with the way that our society is set up right now that are causing that to be more common?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There's all of these like blue zone kind of obsessions going on right now with people increasing their lifespan and increasing the longevity of their life. And people do all of these kind of outrageous sometimes health things associated with this. But then one of the things that has been identified is if you're doing all these amazing health things, exercise, sleep, eating only Mediterranean food, right? Fish, nuts, veggies, that's it, right? No preservatives, all of this stuff, right, that people are doing. But you're lonely. Loneliness has the equivalent effect on your health in terms of detriment as like smoking a pack of cigarettes, right? Which is, I don't know how they compare the two, but what I do know is like, it's wildly detrimental, not just to our like soul being or our emotional being. It's wildly detrimental to our physical being. And the word epidemic just characterizes the fact that it's viral. And that's actually really interesting to think about because when something is viral or when something spreads, when something's an epidemic, we saw this in COVID, right? That it's not just me having COVID only affects me and will only ever affect me. It's like the fact that I have COVID could very likely affect you. The fact that I am isolated, if I am isolated, the fact that I close myself off from friendships, that I go into my own hole and live all on my own and don't connect to other people. Well, if I did that, I wouldn't be connected to you. And the other people that are in my life right now, I wouldn't be connected to them. So in some ways, we think about like, oh, it's this individualistic decision that only affects me. And it's like, well, the minute you remove yourself as a node of communication and connection to other people, that absolutely affects other people. And so it's one of the reasons why I think it's really critical as leaders. It's not just an opportunity, it's a responsibility. Like, there are lonely people out there right now. There are isolated people out there right now. And one way you can help counter that is not being an isolated person yourself. Like, go connect to other people. Be the instigator. Be the person that's proactive about saying, hey, it's better that we be together and we should go about doing that because everyone's waiting on someone to do that. And it's going to be the leaders that actually step up and say, I'm going to initiate.
We've kind of laid the map for why this is an important topic, why we're talking about it. What causes isolation?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm no psychologist by any means, right? And I'm certainly not an expert on this topic. What I can look at is my own experience. I would say I'm wildly connected now in deep ways. I have deep, transparent, authentic relationships. Praise God for that because it's very different from in some ways, my natural predisposition, right? Like my default is not that. So it's taken a lot of work to get there. So I can think about what caused it in my past, but then I also can see and observe patterns and trends in the leaders that I connect with and sometimes have quite deep conversations with that I would say, man, they do struggle with isolation. What is causing that? But then also the leaders that I see walk out of that darkness and into the light, it's like they're always countering some of the same things. So we've got kind of 4 categories of things that I think represent causes of isolation, particularly in the life of business owners and leaders. And it's not like these are just theories. These are what we've observed in the leaders that we work with. They're what we've observed in ourselves. And now we're just kind of putting language to them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are they?
So we'll walk through them high level and then we can break down each one. There are 4 S's just to help with memory. It's secrets, speed, silos, and superhero syndrome. So maybe we just start with secrets.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, start with secrets. Just a light one to get started with, right? So whenever we hear the word secrets, I think it's helpful in our mind to think about a core emotion associated with secrets. And the core emotion associated with secrets is shame. Because what are secrets? Well, secrets are when there are things that you know or regularly think about or do that no one else knows about. And the thing that we have to recognize is secrets by nature are isolating. you cannot have a non-isolating secret. It doesn't exist, right? And so when people say, "Oh, this is just information for me," right? I don't need to share this with anyone. That's actually not true, because the minute you say that, you're basically saying, "I can live in isolation in this area of my life." And so what causes secrets, if we're going to get to the root of it, the core emotion is shame. I like that acronym for shame. Should have already mastered everything. I say I like that acronym. I actually hate that acronym, but it's helpful, right? Is what I would say. And that's what drives our secrets, is we think, I've got to have it all put together. No one can know what I'm really struggling with. No one can know the real challenges. No one can know about this addiction. No one can know about that mistake I made. I've got to keep that to myself so that the image I present is put together, should have already mastered everything. And the problem with that is the minute you do that, the person that is actually connecting to all of those people in the world isn't actually you, because you is the person that no one knows about, that you've put away in the closet. And therefore, it's some mask that they're connecting to, but it's definitely not you. And there will always be a hole until you start to actually live out in the open.
How do you decide who gets to know that information?
Yeah, well, that's a whole podcast question. Yeah. Trust is what I would say. One thing that I have found, and I want to be careful how I say this, because there is certainly such a thing as oversharing, right? But I actually think a lot of us, especially if you're listening to this type of content, I actually think you probably struggle with undersharing more than you struggle with oversharing, right? I used to be more selective with who hears about what's actually going on in my life, because I was like, not everyone can handle it. Not everyone deserves to get that information. In reality, I was using that as excuses for not being able to share the things that were really challenging, or that were weaknesses, or that were fallibilities of mine. And I was making other people's inability to deal with it or to receive it my excuse for that. Now I'm a lot more liberal, and quite frankly, it's because I care less about what people think about me as it relates to things that are challenging and stuff like that. I heard this quote recently, like, quite frankly, it's none of my business what other people think about me. This is pretty good, right?
It's amazing what happens when you really can stop taking yourself so seriously.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, obviously, there should be a circle of trust where you have 1 to 3. Some people have 5 individuals that are like, you literally are transparent with about everything. And I have those people in my life that literally, there is nothing you could tell certain people in my life, anything about me, that they would ever be surprised by. There's not a single thing. And that is so freeing, it's not even funny. And so that level of transparency, I would say trust over time is how you get there. But what I would encourage people on is sometimes we're actually protecting ourselves in terms of our image of ourselves more than we're actually protecting our heart and our soul. And that in some ways, people need to loosen their grip on what they're willing to share, is what I would say.
When is a therapist helpful when it comes to secrets? And when could they sometimes maybe increase your ability to stay isolated?
That's a super good question. I am not an expert on therapy, so I'm not going to comment on the industry as a whole.
Sure, yeah.
What I can comment on is my experience with my therapist, who helped me with this a lot. We would talk about things that there was a period of my life where he was the only one that I would talk to about them. And what were you going to say there?
Oh, no, just go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. That was a good breath, Ben. Yeah. We hit something inside there. That's good. So there were things that, like, he was my only person. And I think he responded to that hyper effectively, because every time we would have those conversations, he would be like, Alex, who are some people in your life that you think you could start spending really intentional time with, that you could start sharing this stuff with? And early on in those conversations, I'd be like, I don't think there is anyone. Like, I'm not sure that I can think of him. And he would just always press back and be like, well, we got to find some people because you pay me. And like, if you stop paying me, we're not meeting anymore. and that's you could look at that and be like, that's so rude. That's not rude. That's real.
That's a good therapist.
That is a super good therapist that's like keeping the boundaries of the relationship in line and just making sure that I knew where we standed, which praise God for that, right? And sure enough, it didn't happen after 1 week because it was incredibly uncomfortable for me. But I would have him in the back of my head saying like, you got to find some people, you got to find some people, you got to find some people. And then dadgummit, I started to find some people and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't need a therapist anymore. Yeah. and I was like, I don't think I need to be with you anymore eventually. Yeah. And he was like, praise God, we got there. Like we did it.
And I guess what you're not saying is like, your friends shouldn't be your therapist, but therapy, I think, is a space to practice things that maybe you've never done before and get the reps in to try a low risk area where you're like, hey, I do have some shame and things I need to work through. But the intention is always like, how do you pull that outside into the rest of your life?
That's so well said. And then too, because not everyone is practiced at receiving really messy, challenging, difficult stuff well, you've got like a model of like, okay, well, that person really struggled doing that well, but it's okay. I have grace for that because I know what well looks like. Yeah. And I don't have to take their fumbles as part of who I am or anything like that. The final thing that I want to make sure, because I know we can't park on secrets for too long, is sometimes we can hear the word secrets and we can think, oh, that's like that addiction, that affair, that huge thing that I'm keeping hidden away that people don't know about. This podcast gets listened to enough people right now where I would say there's probably someone that is struggling with those things. If you are that person, here's what I will tell you is there is nothing you could do that would catalyze your personal growth more than to start conquering that thing seriously. Like to literally say, I'm going to get distracted by all these other things, all these other books. I'm going to go get help on dealing with this thing that's this massive holdback. And I say that with a lot of empathy and a lot of grace because I know it's really, really hard. But oftentimes the thing that's hardest to do is the thing we most need to do if we actually want to grow. And so if that is you, make that your action out of this podcast is go get help for that thing. But a lot of times people have moved through that stage and they think I'm done with secrets now. And what I often see with business owners is secrets take on a much more subversive tone. The number of men that are business owners that I have had conversations with that say, oh, I don't want to share that this is going on in the business with my spouse because I don't want to scare her. That is a secret. And because it's a secret, it's isolating. It's isolating for you, but it's also isolating for her. And your role is not to protect your spouse from the truth, is what I would remind people of, right? Your role is to provide and protect, but that doesn't mean to lie to them in the process or keep things from them in the process. Our goal is together, like, man, I'm going to share with you the really challenging things that are going on with regard to the asset that we own. And we're going to talk about those things because it's okay to be scared, but we can figure this out together. And like we can have the courage to move forward in spite of our fear, the faith to move forward in spite of our fear. And when you keep it a secret instead of sharing it, you not only isolate, but you actually rob them of experiencing all of the intimacy associated with struggling together.
Yeah.
And so I would just really urge against that type of secret as well.
Let's move on to speed.
Yeah. So speed, in some ways, these are all interconnected, but a lot of times we are isolated because we are moving so dadgum fast and we're not willing to slow down for anyone to actually be with us. And that's the antidote to isolation, right? Is people being with you. And the business owners and leaders that I meet that are often most isolated, the single thing that's getting in the way of them being connected is their unwillingness to slow down.
Are results and relationship at odds?
Not over the long haul, but in a certain time horizon, yes. So, if I'm saying I'm going to get the result by the end of the week at whatever cost, then me involving Ben and getting that result is actually a lag. right? Like you're a sandbag tied to my ankle because I can just go do this, right? If I'm saying my goal is to get the optimal result in relationship and it can take 2 weeks instead of 1 week, well, then not only can I get the result, I can do it with you. We can build relationship in the process, and then we experience the fruit of that result as our accomplishment, not just my accomplishment that you were a spectator for. So they certainly can be at odds, but it's really a choice if you're going to put them at odds.
How does like having vision fit into that? Like long-term vision versus the short-term things?
Yeah. As it relates to vision and not being isolated and not allowing other people to feel isolated, I always want my vision to be connected to the people that I'm working with, right? So I do own the business, and there are certain things that I really care about for this business that it would be disingenuous at best for me to ignore that those cares don't exist and then just come to you and be like, what should our vision be for the business, right? Because you're going to experience bitterness from me eventually if I neglect those dreams or visions that I have. What is really helpful, though, is to spend some time identifying and acknowledging the dreams, the cares, the hopes that I have for the business, but then also asking you and asking the other members of our team, hey, what would just be awesome? Like, what is your vision for the future? What do you think we should pursue? What are you seeing right now that's incredible opportunity for us, right? Asking all of these questions so that you are part of the process. And what I always say, prior to writing our current vision charter, I had an hour phone call with every single member of our team, right? And what I said at the beginning of all those phone calls is, hey, I just want to let you know I'm not making any promises that everything you say on this phone call is going to make its way onto the vision charter. What I can promise you is I'm going to listen to all of it, and it's going to be part of the process or considered in the process of writing the vision charter is what I communicated. And what was so cool is I don't think I'm speaking too far for our team when I say they felt more connected to me in the process that I was writing or working on. And I also felt more connected to our team because I was more aware of what they genuinely cared about. So walking with people, not just going out ahead of people.
Is there anything else you want to hit on speed?
That proverb is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I mean, that's it, right? And you got to be willing to slow down, to let people into the day-to-day and to do things with other people. I have ran races, right, by myself before, and it's fun. It's really fun to be an achiever that goes and runs races by yourself. I have also run races where my goal was to help other people get to a finish line, and it is so much fun, right? It's such a gift, especially when you identify this is what I'm trying to do. And so as a leader, your goal is to see other people get to the finish line, and that means you're probably going to have to slow down some, and that's a gift and a responsibility.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so the next one is silos. The leaders that we work with and the business owners that we work with, a lot of them are operating at a 10 in every area of their life, right? It's like, I want to make my marriage the best marriage. I want to make my business the absolute best marriage. I want my friendships to be so good. I want to have this rhythm for personal growth and like these things that I'm reading that are so excellent, right? They're very intense individuals. And I love that. That's why I love the people that we work with, is because they're playing all out in all of life. And I think that's so good. But here's my experience is I can be a little bit of an intense individual. And sometimes I say like, man, I want to play all out in all of life. But that means that when it comes to my relationships, there's no one in my life that can handle all of my life, right? Like I'm a little too much if I share everything that's on my heart and on my mind with regard to my business, the books that I'm reading, that what I'm thinking about with regard to my relationship with God lately, what I'm thinking about in my marriage. Like there's no one that I can share all of my life with. And so what I do is create silos, right? That like, I'll make my all-in business people this cohort of people, and I'll make my all-in life people this cohort of people, and then I'll have my all-in church people. And it's like, what we start to get is these fiefdoms where there are groups of people that have a ton of context on one area of my life, but there's no one that has context on all of my life. And what I have found to be so helpful for me is it's really helpful to have some all of life people. And that is hard. You talk about slowing down, right? Like I got to make sure that if there's something that is ever taking up most of my head space and my heart space as it relates to the business, and it's something that I'm thinking about a lot, like I've got to make sure that that's getting brought up in conversation with Aspen at some point, or it's getting brought up with our small group on a Tuesday night at some point, so that I don't look up 4 months from now and this huge thing that has caused massive trajectory changing decisions in my business, like I give an update on it and they're like, I didn't even know that was going on, right? I think it's good to establish the standard of saying, I'm going to have a few people in my life that are all of life people that get the understanding, not that they're going to have every detail, but they know the general dynamics of what's going on in every arena that you're playing in.
Why is it important to distinguish like silos from secrets? Because I feel like you could get those confused a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say there is like, and maybe it's a version of secrets, but there's times where it's like Aspen's busy, right? And being a mom is a lot, right? And also like our dinners, like it's not like we have a bunch of like one-on-one, like, oh, this is such a thoughtful, deep conversation where we find time to share, right? Because our dinners have a 1-year-old at them now, right? So I would say a lot of times it's not like, oh man, Aspen can't handle this information, so I'm not going to share it with her. It's just like, I don't know when I'm going to share this stuff with her. So, and she's got a lot on her plate. Maybe I just don't, right? Maybe I just keep doing the business thing and she doesn't have to hear about what's going on at work. And it's just always better if we find a way to make the time. Like there's times where it's like, this is taking up a lot of my mind. Like it's taking up a lot of my headspace where I'll say, hey, we're going out on Wednesday night. Can we just go for a long walk? And can we just talk about it a little bit? And in that talking, it doesn't feel like I'm unloading secrets. It's more like, hey, can I just catch you up to what's going on at work so that we're on the same page with regard to that?
Yeah. Anything else you want to say on silos?
The fruit of breaking down silos shows up later is what I would say, right? Like, I mean, you and I are good friends. There's so many times I've known you for 3.5, 4 years now, right? Like there's so many times where we'll have a conversation and I just find myself so grateful that like Ben was there 3.5 years ago, right? Ben was literally in the room when the first episode with regard to Lily's disorder happened, right? And the fact that you have that context and that I don't have to explain that to you is invaluable. But that's not possible if I just keep work bin and life bin, like separate from each other. It's just really helpful to have some all of life people that you're making consistent deposits with over time. The final thing I would say is you need some of these people in person. You can have some of these virtual or on phone call, but man, you need some of these people in person without a shadow of a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Last one, superhero syndrome.
Superhero syndrome. Let me be very clear. This is not a psychologically recognized syndrome, right? But sometimes we'll make a mistake as a leader, or we'll have a pitfall, and the person that's playing the role of coach will say, no one expects you to be perfect. And that is wrong. There are people that expect you to be perfect oftentimes in a leadership position. And why do they expect you to be perfect? Because you taught them to expect that, right? And a lot of times we love to perpetuate the image that we are a superhero. And what I mean by that is we love as leaders, and I say we, I'm really talking out of my playbook right now. I love for people to think I'm above, I'm ahead, I'm on top of it all, right? I've got this. I love people to perceive that. And that works out really well for me for a period of time, all the way up until the point where I don't got it. And then not only do people feel bummed because I made a mistake or I didn't meet a commitment or something like that, they also feel betrayed because I was the person that showed them I am a superhero. I've got this. I'm invulnerable. I'm infallible, right? What's way better is to be very open with my team, with my friends, with my family. Like, I am a knucklehead. I make mistakes. I have fears. I have anxieties. I have worries. I don't know if this is all going to work. I feel like I'm making this up as I go. like me saying this sounds like some hypothetical list that I'm generating right now. Like everything I just said, that is true right now, right? So I'm telling all of you right now, like that is all true right now, right? And it's like, it is such a relief for me to be able to share that with you, because then I can actually connect with you. As long as I'm trying to be the superhero, that person's not real, and that person can't actually connect to anyone. And so if we're going to remove isolation, we gotta let go of the superhero image that we're trying to perpetuate.
I feel like you actually did this really well recently in one of our meetings.
It's always so humbling when someone says, you do such a good job of acknowledging all the mistakes.
Well, it wasn't mistakes. It was as much as like showing like your humanity from your leadership. Like, I mean, we just hired Shay, our salesperson, our customer growth advisor. And like, we're working through the dynamic of like, you are now one more degree removed from the sales process and from the conversations that we're having in that department. And so you acknowledged to the leadership team, like, hey, I'm trying to navigate like some anxieties around me not knowing like the day to day and just being like the reality of just being one more degree separated from that. And it opened up the opportunity for us to go, okay, well, what systems can we put in place to just make what you need to know more visible in a way that like you don't feel like you're micromanaging or asking too many questions. And it was like, if you hadn't taken the step to acknowledge the fact that you were having anxieties about it, who knows where that conversation would have gone or how long it would have taken to have it. So.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you bringing up that example, because that's definitely, I wouldn't have been able to identify it in the moment, but that's definitely, I think that was a bid for like removing isolation, because, we've identified, like from a strategic perspective, we are making a lot of bets on some of the marketing and sales strategies that we're engaging in right now working, right? And so those are our primary priorities. Like we want to make these work. And it feels really bizarre is like I have indirect influence in those areas, right? Like he's not my direct report. We are all working on creating that system together, but like I'm not the person that's directing everything, and I don't have the fastest feedback loop, right, on all of those things that are going on. And as a result, it can create a lot of tension. And I almost didn't speak up at that leadership team meeting, because the structure of our leadership team meeting is we do our strategic priority updates, and then we walk through like what are the challenges, the blockers, the obstacles or opportunities that we have questions around that we need to discuss. And this felt like this ambiguous thing that I literally was like, I don't even know what the question is. I just feel like I really want to say this. And I think I literally said that. I said, I don't know what the question is. I just feel a lot of tension around this. And I think all of the solutions and systems that we created on the back end of that were pragmatically extremely helpful. I think equally, if not even more helpful, was just knowing that y'all knew, right? Like, hey, this is something that is on my heart and on my mind a lot. And it feels like stress right now. And I just want to share that with you. Just sharing that was like deep breath. And, it felt very vulnerable and very humble to be like, I don't have a question. I just want to share this. I see a lot of leaders facing that same thing where they're like, it just feels like I'm the one that's carrying this right now. And what's crazy is like, that's because you are doing that, right? Like it felt like I was the only one carrying it, but that's only because I was the only one carrying it, right? There was nothing that was keeping me from giving you and Olivia some of that. It was just me. Right. And so the minute I actually said, okay, I'm going to give this to y'all received it so well, and it was so helpful. And I think our progress has accelerated as a result. So I appreciate you for bringing up that example, because I don't know that I would have tied it to isolation, but it was definitely removing isolation.
Is there anything else you want to say on superhero syndrome or any of these frameworks as we close out?
What I would say is don't confuse connectedness with deep connection. And the fact that you are surrounded by people does not mean that you're not isolated. And so on the back end of this episode, I hope that everyone will take a deep breath and genuinely evaluate, are there areas of my life that I'm not actually deeply, richly connected to other people? And then I would just say, if the answer to any of those areas is yes, do something about it, respond to it, right? And extinguish any of these particular causes that we talked about, so that you can actually live in the fullness of the life that you were created for.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. If you want more content like this, we've got some killer stuff planned. So make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. Let's go, let's go, let's go.